day, but you don't get to boss me around.
I'm not bossing around. I'm just saying hit record so that, you know, can get this rousing issue. No, you duck yourself.
This is a lot of duck we got into this week.
Oh, we did. And there's no duck in it. It's not when you're talking Destoryer Duck.
It's a lot of foul.
It is a lot of foul. It's a ducked up issue for sure.
Fouled up, ducked up. It's all sorts of problems.
It's quackers.
I don't know if there's a lot of problems, but
no. It came from problems, and they turned a bad situation to a good situation, you know?
Well, let's talk to the fans about what we're actually reading.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, I kind of dropped it. I dropped the title in there. I didn't bury the lead too much. I said we're talking Destoryer Duck. People don't know what Destoryer Duck is, probably. They're like, I don't know what this is. I might have seen a dollar bin.
It's one of the first Eclipse comics ever.
Yeah.
Or totally creator-owned independent ones, anyway.
Yeah. Honestly, as I started picking up stuff in my, I'd say later years, not when I was younger, but when I was younger, digging through boxes, I'd see these Eclipse books, and I was like, what are these? Well, you know, they'd always be interesting, but it wasn't something like I knew. But as I got older, I was like, oh man, these are nice gems to find, and this is a definite gem.
Well, I think too, with when you're a kid, right? Like you're programmed to know brands, right? So,
yeah.
You know, I same for me, right? It's like, oh, okay. Image was a big change in that, right? Because it's like you have Marvel and DC, and then when all those artists went at the same time, it's like, oh, wait, this isn't just an indie company. It's Image.
Everybody.
Except if you look at some of the early Image stuff, it's very much an indie company.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, it's because some of the stuff is just not good, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that doesn't mean, and I would say like some of the indie books, right, were much better, right? We were talking about First a couple podcasts ago, right? And American Flag and John Sable, right?
Yeah.
And so First was putting out some really high quality stuff in 1984. That's only a couple years after this. This was put out in 1981 originally. But we're looking at the two Morrows publishing, Destoryer Duck Graphite Edition, noted by, should I just say it?
Yes, drop it.
The writer is somebody you should have heard of, Steve Gerber, because he created some guy named Howard the Duck.
Oh yeah, that Howard the Duck book, and then they made a movie and some other stuff. But
and he wrote a bunch of stuff for Marvel. I mean, it's not this isn't the only thing he did. You know, he did a bunch of Defenders work. He wrote for the big two later. I mean, he's done a ton of stuff. And then the artist on this book is some guy I'm sure you've never heard of.
You know, it kind of escapes me a bit. Some people might call him the King.
Jack Kirby.
Yeah, that Jack Kirby guy.
And the cool thing about this edition is they re-released these in just with his pencils. So they call it the Graphite edition. Ha, get it? Pencils? Yeah.
Pencils.
So, but I mean, one, as we get into this, if you're interested in this at all, I highly recommend. I'll try to remember to put a link to this in the chat, assuming they still have some in stock, right? This is amazing. I bought this for Greg as a present. Still haven't given it to him. He has the PDF, because Two Morrows is always nice enough to give you a PDF of the work when you buy the actual physical work. So super cool on them too. And I bought it for Greg and then haven't given it to him. So I'm sitting here reading out of Greg's nice hardbound copy, and Greg is reading electronically. But yeah, I mean, you got on the cover, the man-slaying mallard's mission of vengeance reproduced from Kirby's pure pencil art is the catch. And we've got a foreword by Mark Evanier, who apparently, reading him, I didn't know much about him, but he was heavy into Eclipse comics as well as a bunch of animation. So super cool. You probably knew about him. I'm the ignorant one there.
Well, like when you look up Mark and you start to like tie all the lines together in your crazy board that everyone has in their office, like I do, as to like everything that's ever touched your life as a child or something like that. You're like, wow, everything. So lots of different connects there.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you are sort of like the question, so I understand why you have crazy boards.
I had to jump off for a second. Grandma's calling me.
Backing around and
Quack quack.
back into. So when Greg had to take a slight interruption, we were on to talking about how Mark Evanier sort of touched all sorts of parts of everyone's childhood, and it's neat. It's something I was joking with a listener.
Yeah.
So apparently we have more than one, because this person has been listening to all our podcasts. And I said, in this episode, it's going to be backwards world, because Greg's going to have more of the history and Dan's going to have more of the questions. And wow, this comic is cool. So, but yeah, I mean, I was excited. I've only read the front matter. I haven't read the back matter, but just the front matter is freaking amazing. Just this little 12-page kind of story about how this comic comes to be. And you get about 12 pages of story. Yeah, between a foreword by John Morrow, the editor at Two Morrows, which shouldn't surprise anybody if you follow their company, and then this introduction. Yeah, it's really neat. And I think the other really, I'm gonna say really neat 1,000 times, because it is an amazing part of this book. And you were just sort of talking to me. You also get a big piece of history, because there's the plot and synopsis for every single, or at least for the first story, is there. And you get to read basically like Steve Gerber having a one-sided conversation with Jack Kirby.
Oh yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. I love it. I love the fact that they have this friendship and this ability to have this, he's like, Jack, this is what I'm, it's like he goes into it like they've had this conversation and he's scripting it out, and it's like, I imagine this room filled with these anamorphic people, these animals. They got people bodies but animal heads. This is how I want them drawn, and it's just very detailed. And it's the kind of script that is a very like that classic Marvel script. In a sense where, we're going to fill in the dialogue later. This is everything I want in the panels. And I love reading it. It's so rich, and it's great to read something like that. It's not something, it's the kind of scripts that I would write with Travis for Brett. And
Travis and Brett are
for Starlight. I apologize. So Brett Woodell and Travis Webb. So Travis Webb and I write Starlight, and when we write for Brett, a lot of it is that kind of conversation we're having with him, because we've known Brett for a very long time. Travis and Brett have a friendship that spans decades, and I've known Brett for like a decade now or more. But it's one of those things where when you know somebody and you can have that kind of conversation and you're on the same wavelength, right? It's not something that you could just like do and be able to just like drop that kind of script to somebody and expect them to just make it happen. Because a lot of times when you're scripting out something, especially something as detailed as this, you're gonna if it was anybody else, any other team, you'd probably want everything out there on the page so that there's nothing being missed, right? So I know when I've done other projects, everything is in there, all the dialogue, everything else, so that there's an idea as to how much space we're going to use and other things like that for lettering and other things. So it's always interesting to see how the flow works between different creative teams. And with this creative team, you can see that kind of unique bond that they have, and definitely from the school of comic book creation that they're from.
Yeah. And I just, well, no, I think I'm just listening, right? Like I mean, and this is the kind of thing, again, I was joking because you're going to have so much more knowledge here because you do this, right? Yeah. For those of you that aren't aware, Greg writes comics and works with artists, and yeah, this is neat. I think that also I keep saying neat because it is, right? It's one of those things you read and you're like, wow. Also the history of this, though, when you look at the why behind the fact that the why behind this comic book being produced at all, right? Mm-hmm. This in today's world might have been produced. I mean, we've seen the stuff with Bill Willingham, right? Mm-hmm. And Fables. and him trying to put it in public domain over a dispute with a publisher. You may be waiting for a property of yours from a certain publisher.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying it doesn't happen now, right? It certainly happens now. But I think it's less likely, right, that people would have to take these steps to get a book published. And so if you're reading the back history or you're not familiar, Steve Gerber writes for Marvel. He writes some Defender stuff, some other stuff. And then he creates Howard the Duck.
Yeah, he creates Howard the Duck, and he gets the short end of the stick. That's the easiest way to say it, right? He writes a nice run for them, and they tell him, I want to say, like, hey, we're gonna stop the line on this for a couple different reasons, but we're gonna just say you're slow on production. That was the reason. And he's like, I want my book back.
Yeah, like it's and they wouldn't give it to him
because at the time it was a lot of like I want to say like contractual stuff and other things like that. It was a big who owns this? Does he own it? Was he a work for hire? Does he create this for the company? Did he create this as a partnership? Was it something that he owns? So it went into I want to say like a couple year lawsuit for him and Marvel on the actual Howard the Duck property before anything was decided and before they even went any further with it, or before he continued to work for them on stuff, because he was kind of at a standstill. And this book came out of that, I want to say, frustration point.
Yeah, and eventually, if you know a little bit of the history, he does team back up with Marvel, right? Because he's a writer on the Howard the Duck movie in 1986. So this was in 1981. So I wouldn't say it was like a great loving, hugging relationship getting back together, right? But they do. Yeah. But then, of course, Howard the Duck the movies might be one of the, I don't want to say worst adaptations, but
it's a definite unique adaptation of the story, and it was an interesting telling of Howard the Duck. It was definitely, as a kid watching it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. As an adult watching it, I'm kind of like, what? How did they make this? Why? But yeah. But at the same point, there's the child inside me loves it so much. I don't know. I mean, like I've said it on the podcast before, Howard the Duck, the comic book series is a comic book run that I've had in my collection since I was a kid, because it was one of those ones that was gifted to me from my dad, my uncles, and stuff like that. And then at one point, I believe that they took a couple of the key issues. There's the Star Wars cover and a couple of the other ones that were high value. They've ridiculously been high value, and even back in the 80s when these things happened, they borrowed them to go put towards other things, and borrowed them with the intent of putting them back in the collection, and they never went back. So I've been hunting them down ever since.
Yeah, and that's what, I've never read a single Howard the Duck comic book, so this is my introduction to Steve Gerber's Duckverse. I have watched the movie, and I can't tell you that I remember anything about that movie.
He was a duck, and he ended up on Earth. There you go.
I mean, I know that part. He's a duck. He's here. He's from another universe, correct?
Yeah. He's from another universe. And as I will tell you this, as you read Destoryer Duck, and as we get into it, maybe the parallel of Destoryer Duck, and I'm jump into this a little bit, but on his hunt for the little guy, maybe the little guy is Howard the Duck. We just don't know it.
It could be, and we don't know, but we're going to find out. And I will say about this, I think it's important to know the history of Howard the Duck. Mm-hmm. And they give you that in this book, right?
Yeah.
So definitely. It's there for you.
I love the
fact, not the whole history, right? The history of
how Marvel it was created,
versus
of Marvel.
Steve
yeah.
Gerber, right?
Yeah. Marvel versus Steve Gerber, and Gerber, like going to these, and I can say I've been in these kind of Gerber type situations where they talk in the back matter where he's
You've
at a
been
party. Well, no, but maybe. But he goes to a party, doesn't know anybody, he's like, oh, I know, I'm talking to this person, I didn't get their name, but we really hit it off or whatever. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey, this is so-and-so. And I just spent like an hour talking to this person. That's awesome. But doesn't, it's one of those just random moments, that just happens or whatever. And it's kind of, it's neat because it's like, oh, this is like literally how the industry does work in that sense.
Well, and you're saying how Mark Evanier met Steve Gerber. So he's referring to the front matter. And they're just after Gerber had split with Marvel and he meets Mark Evanier at a party. And I think it's an interesting story, too. It's like the ultimate starving artist story, right? Like Mark Evanier gets upgrades to a king size bed and gives Steve Gerber all of his bedding. That's how they meet each other. He's right. Like, here you go. Here, I don't need this.
And it's interesting because that is like literally how on the weird level of how things work in this industry. I mean, it is that simple in some cases. We creators or meet other people and you bounce these things off of each other, and that's how you become friends with people.
Yeah,
it is that easy, people.
Well, and then how Jack Kirby gets involved. So the story there was great too, but I think we'll get to the story in a second, but we're going to talk about the front matter today, and then when we review the rest of them, we'll start talking about some of the back matter, right?
Yeah.
So we're just going to review one issue today. We may review a couple issues at a time in the next one, but we want to make sure we got through some of this front matter. Mm-hmm. I thought the real interesting part too is we find out that Gerber wrote for created. I didn't know he created it. I thought he just wrote for it. So created Thundarr the Barbarian.
Yeah.
With Jack Kirby art, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't know that. And, see, and this is what happens, right? You had your dad, my dad could care less that a comic book existed, right? So like he knew who Superman was and had read them as a kid, right? But he's like, those are little kid things. Your dad, had all that stuff. And your uncle. So, you're looking at these things. Thundarr was one of those things. I know you were too young for Thundarr, and I was also too young for Thundarr, right? So Thundarr came out when I was 5.
Yeah, too young, but still got some of the books at some point because.
But I didn't get into Thundarr, right? People talk about Thundarr was a channel changer for me. I was looking for the Super Friends or something else. Mm-hmm. So when I was a little kid, it was on ABC. It ran for just a year, I think. Mm-hmm. Or a couple years. It didn't run very long. It did have a re-release, but when they re-released it, then I was old enough. But I was like, what is this? Mm-hmm. I didn't, I just never got into it. And I've never gone back and watched it. And people talk about it like it's it's referred to kind of by some people as like the greatest cartoon ever made, right? Well, of that time period.
If you don't have Thundarr, you don't have He-Man. That's, in my mind. If you don't have Thundarr, you don't have. For a lot of people, Thundarr is the jump off. Like if you have an experience with Thundarr as a kid, then you get into other things like Beastmaster, or you get into things like Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that, and then you're like, oh wow, what are these other books? They're a little more advanced in that sense, right? And then you start reading these things and you're like, oh wow, that's really cool. It's a nice jump off point, right? And then you're like, oh hey, cool, they made a movie with Conan and it's got that guy.
Yeah, and you also look at the time frame for me. I didn't get, if you look back to that Legion issue I was referring to with the first with the Star Wars, and that was in 1983, right? Mm-hmm. So Thundarr was rerun on, and I'm on the Great Source Wikipedia, but it was rerun on NBC in 1983 because they tried to revive it.
Yeah.
And it just ran for a couple seasons, right? So it says from October 4th, 1980 to October 31st, 1981. So I wasn't, I had comics, right? I had some Hulk comics and things like that, but I wasn't like super into comics. I remember before my Legion book, I had like one of those 3-issue Marvel sets. Mm-hmm. And I read those over and over again. But yeah, I didn't have a lot, right? Or access to things. So like it hadn't hit me. So this style of writing, right, the Steve Gerber style of writing probably wasn't like hitting, my 5-year-old brain either, right? Like I'm like, oh boy, like
he drops
so
some
later when I'm 8,
stuff
9, 10, yeah, then I'm like, who are all these characters? Now Super Friends, easy access for a 5-6-year-old, right? That's simple writing, very, the same backgrounds, same characters every time. One thing I will say, though, I think I've shared too with you is I always got excited like with the challenge of the Super Friends or the ones where it wasn't just Superman and Batman, right, and Wonder Woman and Aquaman, right? I thought those were not my favorites. My favorites were when all these other random people appeared.
Yeah.
I just also wonder how accessible Thundar is if you weren't, into the into fantasy stuff.
Yeah, that's
into sword and sorcery.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair. If you weren't into sword and sorcery, you weren't into fantasy stuff, you weren't into Krull or Lady Hawk and stuff like that. That and literally like at that time, it was like for me at least it was a gateway. And then like literally as I got older, it opened other doors like D&D and other things like that. But we're not going down that road right now, folks. We're talking.
Yeah, but I think it's important backstory. Well, even you left one out because DC had their copy, right? Camelot 3000, right?
Oh yeah. But and that was one that was like it was interesting.
But it's not the same.
It's not the same.
Yeah. And, and just like carbon copies of anything are not the same.
Yeah.
But the people that worked on this, like Marty Pasco, wrote it. Mark Evanier, of course, wrote some of it, and you start looking at. You're starting to see the connections here. Now, a lot of these connections end up working on this book.
Oh yeah.
Or putting stories not in Destoryer Duck, but put stories in the back. So anyway, it's pretty neat. So we'll get. I've said neat like 8 times because it is. So why don't we get into the story a little bit?
Okay.
And see what they were doing, and I guess. I said we're going to get in the story, but then I was going to ask you a question.
Yeah, ask me a question. Throw it out.
In 1981, when the script is being written, right? Is there anybody that hates Marvel Comics more than Jack Kirby and Steve Gerber?
Anybody that hates them more?
Maybe?
Well, huh?
Like, maybe?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, there are a few people out there.
Neil Adams?
Neil Adams, definitely.
Well, DC, though. He would have more been pissed at DC, right?
But I think he just, and in general, speaking on behalf of all creators, I mean, he's just looking at it from a creator standpoint, and he's wanting to help all creators and get
Neil
leverage.
Adams.
Yeah, Neil Adams is looking for leverage for all creators at that point. He's beginning that front, right? So, so at this point, he's looking at all the big two as a whole, as these are both bad places. Like, we need to get some leverage. We need to get some, do some creator owned stuff and get it to a point where people are getting getting fair pay for what they do.
And so we've got a couple of cool things to start out here.
There's also another person in the mix too. Can't forget about Sergio.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Just an amazing creator of his own on everything that he's ever done for Mad and Gru and other things like that. But I mean, he was a great, when you look at the things that he's done and did as a creator, definitely fits into the mix as somebody that was like, hey, I want to do these things, and being told constantly, no. And it's like, but I can do this, and I'm going to do this because I'm doing it. So
and I didn't read a lot of Gru either, right? Because now we're back to
fantasy,
the funny version of the same genre, right?
Yeah.
That wouldn't have necessarily appealed to me, but yeah, they noted in the front matter that the first appearance of Gru was in the Destoryer Duck comic book.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, how is that in the dollar bins ever?
Right. I know, but it is. It is.
And then, we do need to mention Alfredo Alcala too, who inked it. So, and all these folks did this for free. So the amazing part is they decided to have this book. Everybody donated their work to it, but they got to own their work. Yeah. And then Eclipse published it. So they made over $50,000 on the first book for Steve Gerber's legal fees against Marvel. This is how committed this creator and artist community is to take down one of the big two. And I'll also say, too, you think about this, right? Again, I mentioned Image, right? And it's like Image is that time when all the artists got together and said a big F you to Marvel and DC, right? Wait a minute. It had already happened.
Yeah, because
like
without
10 years earlier.
Yeah, with this one Eclipse book, without a book like this, honestly, people, like, you don't have the kind of Kickstarter community that we have right now. You don't have the kind of Indiegogo community that you have now. You don't have the kind of coffee community that you have. You don't have any of that.
You don't have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
You don't have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You don't have these two guys creating their Mirage comics. You don't have any of that because there is no I want to say tangible, like, you can do this without something like this. This is a really good genesis point. I mean, you have other books out there that have been done that did something, but this created such a groundswell, and it was such a big moment.
What? Because and the point they made is they Mark Evanier makes the point that they were able to prove that you could do this without a giant staff and giant overhead.
Yeah, and people just donated their time and doing
kitchens,
it.
Right?
Yeah,
and
they did
home offices and put it together. And he said they were really proud of it because the quality of it was as high as a book coming out of those other publishers.
Yeah,
they were even using the same printer that the other publishers were using.
Yeah, when you look at this book, you're like, this is on par with everything that they've worked on in the past with those big two. It's just not from the big two.
Well, let's get into this thing. We've got first off, but as we get into it, we noted Neil Adams inked the cover, and there's a letter from Steve Gerber to Dean Mullaney. Dean Mullaney, apparently from Eclipse, went to Neil Adams' studios at Continuity and watched Neil Adams ink the book. And Steve says, here are the logo and original Xerox reproductions, the first half of the plot, and the original Kirby art for the cover of Destoryer Duck. I'm writing this before I actually see Jack's drawings, but I'm sure he's done beautifully with it. Don't let Neil change the pencils, and don't let him take away the very long getting this. Let him take very long getting this done. Camp out at Continuity if you have to. But be sure he gets it finished quickly. And just in case such a camping trip isn't feasible, make stats of the pencils. Please call me to let me know the package arrived safely. With this one-of-a-kind stuff, I get very scared. Let me know what you think of it all. Take care, Steve. He says, P.S. On a whim, I sent a copy of the Destoryer Duck ad to Dick Giordano, who's at DC Comics, along with some of his Phantom Zone pages, assuming he got to do that for DC at the time. It'll be interesting to hear his reaction to this project.
I love this letter so much for all that.
And I love it all as well. And then I also want to point out one more thing, because I said we were going to start, but we've got the cool Destoryer Duck logo here. And I believe you've maybe heard of the letterer.
Maybe.
One Tom
Orzechowski.
Have you ever worked with that guy?
Oh, yeah, I have.
Oh, you mean so he's still giving his work to indie creators and indie books?
He is still working on indie books with indie creators. He is the letterer for Starlight. He is a record holder for the Guinness Book of World Records for lettering all of the Spawn books, and he's working for all the books. He's done work for everybody, so not just indies, but he's an amazing letterer. And honestly, like my writing based off of notes from him and discussions and stuff like that, I will say having an amazing letterer that's been in the industry for decades has helped me become a better writer, because I have a better understanding of what you're going to want to put in there. And a lot of times it's just amazing how just a small conversation sometimes makes a difference. So.
Well, I'm super. Yeah. I mean, this again, the tiebacks in this are crazy, right? You've actually worked with one of the major contributors to this book. For your own book.
And oh my gosh, I have goosebumps right now. You don't even know. Just because this is such a piece of history, and just having that small little tie to it is It's kind of cool.
Well, we get the opening page here, and we get a letter from Ned Packer, president, to Sidney Upwind, chairman, from GODCorp Limited, interoffice memo, and it was made very clear by Mark Evanier in the front matter that Ned Packer is supposed to be Jim Shooter.
No way.
Yeah, like just full on.
Pow, pow.
You know what? Someday we're going to interview Jim Shooter, and this guy's just going to punch me in the face for all the things.
All the things.
All the things I've said. But Jim, remember, when you were like 13 and wrote those Legion stories, we all loved you.
We did.
And then you grew up.
Yeah. And
admittedly, you can go from being a nice kid and growing up to be a complete fucking asshole.
No.
It could happen.
Yeah.
But then after he left Marvel Comics as the editor, he seems to have chilled out and become a nice guy again.
Yeah.
So,
because he doesn't. Yeah. But
his blog still does take credit for everything in the universe. Really,
well,
you know that everything started and ended with Jim Shooter. He's the alpha and omega of comics, right?
Yeah, because he wants to grab it all, own it all, drain it all.
Well, that is what GODCorp stands for.
It is.
And here on a cover, we have this memo dated May 2nd. It says, our people and legal concepts inform me that as we have initially believed, ducks have no rights under the law, regardless of what vocal verbal ability they may possess. Accordingly, the little guy, as per my previous memo, shall henceforth be accorded all the respect ordinarily reserved for the unruly chattel. It, the duck, is our property, to do with as we see fit. All contracts entered into with the fowl are to be considered null and void. Its salary is to be discontinued. All communications from its attorneys are to be ignored. Entertainment Concepts may exhibit the little guy when and where in whatever matter it chooses, and at its sole discretion. Or, as we have discussed last Friday, we should feel free to hand the animal over to the Medical Concepts boys for research. I recommend the latter, as the public is likely to sympathize with the duck's anti-GODCorp sentiments, should he ever find a forum for the same. The media loves this kind of crap. The sooner we determine a profitable manner to dispose of him, the better. Packer, Ned Packer, NP. And he didn't even write this himself. He had his secretary write it.
Yeah.
There's initials. And then we've got the Human Needs Division, includes eating concepts, meat concepts, vegetation concepts, dwelling concepts, apparel concepts, companionship concepts, intimacy concepts, devotional concepts, behavioral concepts, mercantile concepts, sleep concepts, mobility concepts, medical concepts, sewage concepts, and death concepts. Their leisure division includes entertainment concepts, jock concepts, and partying concepts. And their socio-technology division includes energy concepts, mineral concepts, military industrial concepts, conceptual concepts, intelligence concepts, legal concepts, and enforcement concepts. I believe we call this vertical integration.
Yes, that is correct.
And at the bottom of their memo, it says, we make product.
Yes, they make
That's
product.
their motto. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and in today's world, you could align that with just about any corporation. But yes, anyways.
Now, I did have Paul Boudreau, the jiu-jitsu lawyer, look over this memo.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't think it was particularly, he didn't think it would stand up.
No.
I'll just say that.
It's a letter, it's a memo, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know.
But if somebody was sentient, he didn't think this would stand up.
No. Probably.
Well, anyway, we get to the story, and we get Destoryer Duck, man-slaying mallard on a mission of vengeance. It's created by Steve Gerber and Jack Kirby, Alfredo Alcala. Steve Leialoha was the original colorist again, and he redrew some of the Beaks, we learned. Mm-hmm. And Beak consultant, it says.
Yes.
And Tom Orzechowski, I'm going to say, I always say it wrong, but you say it right because you are friends with him. The original editor.
He spelled it out phonetically for me, so that Orzechowski.
Yeah. And also in the front, I will say John Morrow re-lettered it for this edition.
Cool.
So, all right, and we've got a duck that's had a hard day of work.
Yeah. He's unwinding at this nice bar.
Yeah.
Hanging back with a beer.
And we find out his name is Duke Destroyer.
Dick Destroyer. Wow.
I was thinking of the Destroyer Dick Buyer. I'm sorry, the wrestler. Yeah, like it's my bad. And so you can see how that would.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Duke Destroyer Duck, and he is very pissed about his wife leaving him.
Mm-hmm.
Or his girlfriend, I really can't tell, but for some sort of hippie.
Yeah, he's just upset.
And it says in the caption, the little guy, Destroyer's lone friend and confidant, can only manage a shrug. We've got a lot of animals in a bar. It looks like a adult version of the Zoo Crew that comes out a few years later. Yeah.
Right. Whole bunch of animomorphic animal people.
Done by another Marvel editor, Roy Thomas.
Yeah.
At DC. Go DC.
Yeah.
So, and then as Destroyer's complaining about all the things that are happening, all the rest of the workers there keep making fun of him.
Giving him a tough time. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically say, and he's like, I can't help it if I'm sensitive.
Yeah.
And as we get going through the story, we have one cat woman, I might say.
Yeah.
I don't know her name, but a cat woman.
Yeah, she's a cat woman.
Says someone ought to nail that large duck's yap shut. So, and we got the little duck. He just says, probably not, Duke. Some of us just aren't given to big emotional displays. Yeah, it's not a good day for Destroyer.
No, not a good day.
Not having a good time.
No.
And then somebody takes Destroyer's hard hat off.
Yeah.
And dumps a beer on him.
Oh, splosh.
It's big, loud warthog. And this is before warthogs were beloved by all.
Before they were beloved by all because of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And
I was thinking of Timon and Pumbaa, but
okay. See, two different because
in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the warthogs are still bad guys, right?
They're bad guys, but you love them. You love the warthog.
They're the laughable bad guys. Well, kind of like here.
Yeah.
And maybe, just maybe, I'm not saying they lifted that right out of here, but it kind of looks like they did. Could have. It's entirely possible.
Totally.
I'm going to guess that they were probably big fans of this book.
Probably.
Eastman.
It's a good book.
I have no idea. I have no proof of this in any capacity.
We could go ask them someday.
We could, I guess. They're becoming less accessible again, though, because now they got famous again.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. We missed our
anyway, shot. We needed that down quiet time. Well, anyway, Destroyer is not a big fan of what's going on, and he stuffs the warthog's head in the beer mug.
Yeah, which is really a feat. I mean,
Yeah, it is quite a feat. I mean, just the tusks alone.
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of Tusker of the Legion of Substitute.
Oh, yeah, totally. But it's
Well, not Legion, the Legion of Substitute Villains, I think.
Substitute Villains, yes.
Well,
they have a little tumble.
Get back, and Destroyer comes back to Little Duck and says, how'd you like that uppercut, pal? And he's like, real keen, Duke. Peachy. You descended effortlessly to Benny's level. And then the Little Duck disappears.
Poof, gone.
And we have no idea what's happened to him. It's like the memo happened at the beginning of the story. They just took him away.
Yeah, just took him away. Gone.
And Duke, the Destroyer Duck, is devastated. He's like, I've lost my only friend. And he says, and all I got left is his opinion that I could do something with my life. I guess I owe it to you, pal, to put your theory to a test. Oh, and boy, would he.
Yes.
And it says, up until now, the life of Duke Duck has been a violent but relentlessly ordinary one. But then he enlists in the special forces and becomes basically Rambo Duck.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that. I said that. But.
Yeah, no, but he basically does. I mean, he goes off to war. He's just taking out bad guys left and right.
And then he becomes the Flash Duck.
Yeah.
Science Duck.
Yeah, Science Duck. Gets his degree.
Digs into academia.
Yeah.
Gets his degree. And then he looks like he's a professor.
I believe so.
He became a police officer, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking like a professor. He's all chilling out in his chair with the big, what are those things called in the chair? What kind of wingback chair? Is that what
wingback chair? Yeah.
There we go. Yeah, he's got his wingback chair going on. I love this art, by the way.
Yeah, that's really good.
Did I just say I love this art, by the way, about Jack Kirby's pencils?
Yeah, you did.
By the way, I love Jack Kirby's pencils.
They're really good. They're really good.
Something about the duck bills were redrawn, and now I'm dying to get like the
originals where
because I want to see really the duck bills. Right?
How bad were Jack Kirby's duck bills?
I don't know. Like it's hard to say.
How
bad were they? I don't know.
Must be bad.
So
I'm going to draw you this book about ducks. I really can't draw duck bills, so you're just going to get a duck face and no bill.
I don't know. I feel like there's some duckbills. Maybe they're not as pronounced as the original duckbills, but
Do you know why he didn't draw a duck bill? Because he didn't get paid, so there was no bill.
Well, that's fair. I hate you so much. I was just about to say, I have not read the original, so I'm not seeing the differences, right? So,
yeah.
Anyway, well, his friend, the little duck, just walks through his front door. And he's like, he can't believe he's alive. He's lived this whole life. His friend disappeared, dedicated his whole life to him. Now there's blood spilling out of him. And he's like, I'm finished, Duke. They opened me up like a gunny sack, poked around inside, and never bothered to sew me back up.
Oh,
God. It says, the great gray mallard shudders with rage. And he's like, who? Oh, choke. Oh, my God.
What?
He has a Silver Age choke in there. Yes. Steve Gerber, I love you. Like, I know you're not alive, but I love you for having this right here. Okay. I think I missed that on my first read through, too.
On your first read, yeah.
We got a choke and a gasp in the next two panels. And we find out that last night at Ginger's, I vanished out of this world into another space-time continuum where ducks can't talk and pink primates call all the shots. This sounds like a story that was told somewhere else.
Yes, it does. It's very similar.
Well, it says I was broke, starving. I signed on with this company, Entertainment Concepts Limited, a division of GODCorp, the world's biggest corporation. They said they'd make me a star, exploit my curiosity value, but all they did was humiliate me. They hooked me with promises, got me under contract, and they used me as a second banana to a washed-up lounge comic they represented.
Shame.
I feel like the word comic is intentionally used there.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, we find out some more about GODCorp. He says they went off. When the novelty of that wore off, they stuck me in a freak sideshow. And when even that didn't draw the crowds anymore, they booked me in a live sex show on Times Square.
Poor little guy.
I know. And he's like, I hired a lawyer, tried to get out of my contract, but GODCorp ignored his letters, wouldn't return his calls. And they said, take care of me if I called him off. I said no, so they cut off my income. And then he went back to corporate headquarters and met with Ned Packer, the president of the whole company. And he said it was all a bookkeeper's error. They got confused because he transferred my contract to another division, medical concepts, and then they ripped him up.
Terrible.
Well, following the internment, Duke's requests a leave of absence from the force and undertakes a weird journey across the expanse of negaspace. Man, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Marvel thing. I don't know anything about that.
It does.
Like the negative zone or something?
The negative zone.
Is that what it's called?
So I don't know. But he ends up. What's it
called? What's that thing that Reed Richards always tries to go to?
Maybe it is negative zone.
Well, anyway, Destroyer makes it in, and he is there.
In the heart of the city.
And he is ready to murder some people.
He's got a bag of weapons. He's got everything that he needs. He's ready to, he's ready for battle. He's Rainbow Duck.
And then we meet a new character named Chumo, who's on a payphone, and he's like,
what's a payphone?
That's a good question. See, in the olden days, before you carried mini computers in your pocket, there were these phones that you put money in, and then you could call people.
No way.
And they were just kind of hanging out everywhere. Kind of like, if you think about it, scooters, right? Think about where scooters would be. But instead of a scooter, there'd be a payphone there. You used to call people.
You can use your computer in your pocket to make the scooter go.
Right, but you didn't have a computer in your pocket back then, so there was.
So you didn't need a scooter back then.
Everywhere. Right.
I see.
Okay. The only scooters were flying scooters on Back to the Future Part 2.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I believe that's a hoverboard. But anyway, this guy named Chumo is calling Mr. Packer, and they're like, "We're recording you." Oh yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it does sound familiar.
And they're like, Chumo's like, he's in commando attire and he's headed south.
Looks like a cop.
Mr. Packer looks he's like, what do you mean? He reminds me of a cop. Bite your tongue, Chumo. Off. Whatever this creature may be, he is not tough. Al Haig is tough. I am tough. A duck is not tough. So they seem pretty confident. And then Ned Packer of GODCorp has basically that chair that I love Jack Kirby. Like, this is the chair This is a new God's chair.
A new God's chair. Like,
Yeah.
levitates and floats.
Yeah, like he's flying around in the chair. I'm like, okay. And he just
It's pretty cool.
They launch him off. I'm like, yes, sir. And he just launches off through the city. Well, we get some miles east. He shows up and he sees his mom, who's Volpa Packer the battle axe.
Yes.
So now I'm wondering, like, I'm just wondering, like, who is the small executive who he thinks goes home to see his mom, right? Because that doesn't seem like it would be Jim Shooter to me.
You don't think so?
And Jim Shooter didn't necessarily have a great long-term relationship with his family.
Okay. So who could it be?
I mean, he did, but not like, I wouldn't say, I don't know. I just would never, I could not know. Like, I'm not on the inside, obviously, but I don't perceive as Jim Shooter, like, running home to mom, right? Like, he was writing comic books to help fund his family's income at, like, 13 and 14. So I probably don't see him running off to mommy, when he needs help.
Mommy, help me. Get your battle axe.
I don't know. I wasn't on the inside. So anyway, she's like, that stinking suburban junkie again. How can you associate with people? You're a big man, and I can't even figure out why you'd want to be seen with me anymore. So she's even like, why are you here?
Why are you here? Maybe it is Shooter.
He's like, I prefer dealing with people like you. Ha 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 ha. And then he gets back in his chair and basically he says all of GODCorp's employees and freelancers are junkies, mother. We encourage that dependent relationship.
Oh, terrible.
Self-reliance breeds self-esteem. I can't read this comic today. Jeez.
It seems like the kind of inspirational posters that you see in workplaces. But
yeah, except self-esteem means quitting our jobs and doing the things we like.
It's Friday for you listeners out there, so we've had a long week.
So you're like, how real are they being right now? I don't know.
We're being when you're told you can't park your car in a parking lot because there's no parking lot to park your car in, but you're expected to come into work because they want you there, but you can't park there, and you have to park 7 blocks away, and they're telling you
barbecue place because.
Be down with that. No joke. Like they gave us a map. This is so people listening, we're just gonna have a little talk off the side here, sidebar. So they gave us a map of where to park for our days in the office. And our office days, we're supposed to park like literally 20 minutes away, and then make sure that we have 20 minutes to walk to where we work.
Well,
isn't that a
probably
joy?
Reach out to the staff of Legal Concepts to have that taken care of. Because see on the next page.
Yeah, I know.
We get a guy in a Superman outfit, but it has the scales of justice on it. And wow, it's
pretty awesome.
These like attorneys have to be prepared for anything these days if they're in the entertainment, legal division. So, and then we get a crash in, and he meets this duck, and next thing we see is this battle axe lady coming in, Duck with the giant axe.
She's just wrecking shop.
The lawyer's like, so these people all work for Packer, though.
Uh-huh.
Because it does say, he says, oh, never mind. He is the good guy. The lawyer is the good guy.
The lawyer's the good guy.
Tax them. Yeah. Okay. And she busts into his office, and he's like, Duke, look out. She's one of GODCorp's assassin squad. And here they go, banging across the street. It's almost like they were on cue for the rat-a-tat-tat of this gun. I appreciate that. And now, after he destroys Battle Axe very quickly, she does not last long.
No,
he goes back to the lawyer and he says, now, as I was saying before, if I got the evidence you needed on GODCorp, could you take him to court? He said, what evidence? How? He said, trust me again, Holmes. You don't want to know. And the lawyer's like, I suppose I can't stop you. Their address is listed in the phone book. And by the way, a phone book is a big book full of phone numbers with names and companies, and you open it and you go in alphabetical order and you find them.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and in a strange turn of events, back then corporations didn't hide their phone number from people and make you contact them through the website.
You didn't have to like go to the website to try to look for a phone number and then find a phone number. And then it says when you call the phone number, it's not a real phone number because it's just a thing that says go to the website. And then you go back to the website and it says call this phone number. And then you go to the phone number and it says after you call this new phone number, then it says email this email.
No,
and then you email the email
phone number and you reached a person, kind of like the woman on the next page.
Whoa.
So we turn the page and Duke Destoryer Duck has made it over to the front door of GODCorp, and he busts in looking for Packer and meets Mr. Packer's personal secretary. And his personal secretary says, halt, foul, but I think more important, it looks like her superpowers are super flexibility.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He says some people are double jointed, some triple jointed. I'm universal jointed.
Whoa.
Wow. Well, she takes out Duke, and next thing we see, he's on a giant press. Looks like he's about to be flattened.
Oh, man.
And Packer says, and you torched my mother tonight. I'd say that makes us even. This is this business, and that's referring to, you killed my friend. He's like, you made it even. You would be foolish to throw away a promising career with GODCorp over a paltry matter of principle.
Paltry or poultry?
It said paltry.
I know, I'm poultry. because it's a duck.
Well, and then Packer's like, you possess a strength of character, a killer instinct, while he was utterly lacking. And Duke's like, damn straight, sleazeball. And he bites his bonds. He gets out, and it looks like it's going to be packing time for Packer.
Yep, because he packs them.
And he gets thrown into the press. He is squished. His shoes fly out. We've got a death on panel of the head of GODCorp. And we get next evening in a plush Midtown eatery. It says, I've only glanced through the file, Duke. That's the lawyer. I've already turned up enough dirt to keep Procter & Gamble in business till the year 2000. Ow. And GODCorp in the courts for a year or two longer. And Duke is like, then let's knock one back for the little guy home. And he says, sniff, Cabernet Sauvignon, 65. The duck's got taste. And it says, Ned Packer is dead, but GODCorp lives on. And though one small battle has been fought and won, the war has yet to begin. If you demand it, the destruction will continue in the future issues of Destoryer Duck. Write to Destoryer Duck, Eclipse Enterprises, 81 Delaware Street, Staten Island, New York, 10304. We better write in so they do more issues.
We want more issues.
Okay, and that wraps up Destoryer Duck. So, boy, we did a lot on the front end.
Yeah.
A lot on the back end with the issue. So we're going to wrap it up here. But before we wrap it up, Greg, yes. I understand that last week I asked you if you could plug a project that had to do with something with space or something and kids. And I don't even know if I got to say that. You said, no, I can't talk about it. But then this week, your co-author, Michael Tanner, posted it on the internet. So you must be allowed to talk about it, right?
We are. We had a conversation with the editorial team as well as the publisher, and we can talk about it now. So
yes. So you wrote a book called
Absolute Zero's Camp Launchpad,
and it's about
a group of kids that go to a space camp and all the different things that they encounter while they're there, the trials and tribulations of three misfits, if you will. You can go check out Absolute Zero's Camp Launchpad and get a full nice little meet the characters, if you will. You get to meet all of our main characters, and you get to meet Val, Pete, and oh boy, why can't I'm you put me on the spot and now I'm spacing on names, Mark, and meet all these kids. These are our three mains, and then you get to read a little bit about them. But basically, they are three kids that go to the space camp, and they genuinely are amazed by all the fun stuff.
And you can buy a copy of, you can reserve a copy of this book for purchase on Hachette, right?
Yeah, and you can go to Hachette. It's put out by Little Brown and Einhorn.
You can also go to Amazon.
Yeah, so go to Amazon, go to your local comic book store, Barnes & Noble.
You can do that.
You can do any of those things. If you go to Hachette, there's a list of all the different places that you can do that. If you put a pre-order,
if it'll be available on Diamond?
I don't know. I know we talked about that a little bit today, but with the way that Little Brown is putting the book out, because they are this is their first foray in graphic novels. It is I'm not sure exactly what their distribution is like and how they're putting it out. So I don't know, because they're not putting it out like a normal comic book, if that makes sense.
So when we know, we will tell you how to ask your local comic shop for it.
Yeah, but you can put a reserve at Target too, because it looks like it might be sharing space with some of those other fun middle reader kid books. But if you have a place in your heart for movies like Space Camp and other things like that, then this might be your jam if you're an adult, because we definitely pulled from our love for things like that when we were kids. So it's if you've read Junior Braves and you picked up on the Monster Squad and Goonies vibes, you'll definitely pick up on the Space Camp kind of vibes that we put into Absolute Zeros and the way that book is created and the character development.
Awesome. So, and I've been waiting for him to tell me about this for like 15 years. So yeah. I didn't even get to know until it came out. So I was in as much of the dark as the rest of you, but it is good to go. And of course, John Lee Nonley, Johnny,
because he's Joan. He's John, but he's
on the Kickstarter. So you can check that out. Yeah, we'll make sure you have a link for that too. So check it out. We plugged that one a lot last week. And
but
this week we've got Absolute Zero.
Yeah, so check them both out. Put your pre-orders in for that. Go back Chunley and Unley, or share it with your friends. And when we post up stuff about Absolute Zeros, share it out as well, because the more people we get doing pre-orders or just being interested in it. And like I said, Einhorn Epic Productions has t-shirts and stickers available on their website for it, so get your merch, kids. It's actually pretty cool to see a publisher wanting to push something like this for us, because it's very nice.
Yes, it is very nice. And I would say with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. But also, like we said, you can go out and you can get the Destoryer Duck Graphite edition from Tomorrow's Publishing. We highly recommend that too, because there's another great company that supports the comics industry. So we appreciate them. And with that, I guess that's it for today. But we'll be back with some more Destoryer Duck next time. So I anxiously await, because I actually haven't read them. Greg's read a few more, but I haven't read any of them. So I am stoked to see what happens to GODCorp and how Duke the Destroyer starts taking more people out.
I'm just going to say it gets more bonkers than this issue and this episode as the series progresses. It is absolutely amazing.
Well, it's hard for me to believe that Kirby art could get more crazy. So with that said, let's get out of here, and we will chat with you next time.
Bye.